Good morning to everybody and welcome to the second day of Understanding China training program. We are allowing all the participants to access the room, same as yesterday. So thank you very much for waiting a few seconds until we start. So good morning to everybody again. Thank you for making yourself available today for this second day of the conference. Today we have 5 different sessions with extremely important information for both business support organizations and SMEs with interest in China. For those who haven't or weren't able to join us yesterday, I'm going to share small housekeeping notes. For those that were yesterday in the call, in the conference, bear with me these few minutes meanwhile I'm explaining all the technical details. So the conference is being recorded and is going to be available for all of you to view afterwards. Tomorrow, you will receive a thank you note from Zoom with all the links to the different presentations and the recordings that will be saved on our YouTube channel. If you encounter any problem downloading the presentations or visiting our website and YouTube channel, please do let me know. If you have any question for the presenters, I would like to ask you to use the Q&A button that it's been positioned at the bottom of the Zoom function, because we would like to leave the chat for kind of interaction between the presenters and the participants and among the participants as well. This will also help us to coordinate the Q&A session that will follow all the speeches and all the sessions. If you found any technical question or any technical problem, please reach out to me directly through the chat function as well, or send us an email and we will try to solve the problem as soon as possible. So today's session is going to focus on what is going to happen in China in the future. For this reason, we have invited our director, Renzo Isler, who is going to give an overview of the China Economic Outlook 2022 and the latest macroeconomic trends. Afterwards, our colleague Liam Jia, Operations Manager at the EU SME Centre, will be talking about the digitalization of the European SMEs and the solutions that can be provided to companies in these modern and post-COVID times. Later on, our guest speaker, Gabor Holz, will be talking about the China's walled garden, opening and closing, and the resulting business opportunities. And afterwards, another guest speaker will be presenting the managing supply chain in China and the lessons we learned from the COVID pandemic. Last but not least, our colleague Esther Cañada Mela, Advocacy Manager, will be sharing her insights about the future of the EU-China economic relations. I hope you enjoyed today's session as much as you enjoyed yesterday. And without further ado, I would like to leave the floor to Renzo Isler, our director at the EU SME Centre. Renzo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Laura, and good morning and good afternoon to all of you. I'm Renzo Isler, I'm a director of the EU SME Centre. I am very honored to kickstart our second day of Understanding China training program by addressing a quite complex topic related to the economic outlook in China, but not before having made some considerations about the world in a macro and very synthetic analysis. 2021, we could call it a year of transition, a year which is seeing more developed economies emerging from the 2020 pandemic with renewed vigor, slowly resuming some pre-COVID activities, albeit fearing some resurgence from some new variants and subsequent restrictions. The good story is that while politicians were throwing punches to an invisible enemy, scientists proved how big of a progress mankind made in these past years to let us live better and longer lives. The introduction of vaccines worldwide in anticipation of at least one full year to an otherwise normal iteration process has indeed contributed greatly to a still timid but promising resurgence of the world economy, although currently a privilege for the few rather than an opportunity for the many. While GDPs of major world economies are showing to be well on a path to a meaningful plus, there are more dark clouds looming on the horizon. Overall, the public debt, as well as the private one, remains at record high levels. Geopolitical imbalances seem not to recede, while quite the opposite, I would say. Migration and relocation of displaced flocks of human beings are putting some receiving countries with the back against the wall. Digitalization needs to move to the next level in the effort of conjugating innovation with control and safety. Carbon neutrality is taking center stage, but is still far from entering a virtuous trend. Demographics are also putting pressure on the social safety nets of countries, plus other headwinds affecting different countries at different magnitudes. Of all transnational issues which are underscoring this year 2021, I'd say two words are exemplifying the main focus of the international community: digital and green, each acting as milestones in bordering the way forward for this decade. On this path, we find more controversial topics like e-commerce and cryptocurrencies, reshoring of supply chains, energy consumption, ESG and sustainability, all more or less high on the agendas of all G20 plus governments, but all exposed to tremendous challenges as their intertwining effects among targets and amongst countries constitute bumps along the road to progress, common good, and pandemic-free society. Revolving around the digital topic, there are two sensitive issues. On one side, the financial world has witnessed the avalanche entrance of the cryptocurrencies on the international stage, with the potential, although still quite remote, I would say, of disrupting the world of fiat money and the dominance of the US dollar as a universal reserve currency, which initiated after the end of the Bretton Woods system 50 years ago. On the other side, the digital evolution has revolutionized data management, which opened up to artificial intelligence, 5G, big data, blockchain, cloud computing, VR and AR, and to applications which are only at their infancy and whose evolutionary capacity we will witness in the years to come. However, for all good stories, there is a but, which follows. And in this case, we witness counteractions by some governments, which are concerned about their own national security and the protection of their own citizens. So, as odd as it may sound, the barrier breaking of innovative digital technology, which aims at abating borders between people and countries, has generated the exact opposite reaction from some governments, retrenching in a protectionist spree, which contributes more to building walls, both physical and digital, rather than bridges, paraphrasing in this Pope Francis. On the green side, the G20 plus countries have all recently pledged to take strong actions towards carbon neutrality in an effort to reduce global warming and save our earthly environment from potential catastrophes. The upcoming COP26 will measure countries, politicians, economists, and scientists' capacity to come together and realize a common goal to gift our Z generation and beyond with a better, safer, and cleaner future. The still predominant utilization of coal in power generation is making, though, the transition to alternative energy production a very challenging target to reach. The proof lies in front of our eyes, with this 2021 autumn has been plagued by energy shortages and natural disasters, the first also caused by the second. Current statistics, and we will see plenty of those during the COP26 conference, already evidence how much off target we are today in the projection to reach those near-far pledges of carbon peak and carbon neutrality. And it should come to no surprise to see the Generation Z movement on the front line to push somewhat old world leaders to act and take stronger actions to pass a better Earth on to the next and yet unborn generation. But it's not all on government or corporate initiatives. We have all to assimilate this pledge in the way we behave and the way we manage our daily lives. In the past couple of years, the high attention to environmental, social, and governance criteria, or ESG, in assessing quality of companies and institutions have helped and is helping to moving in the right direction. As well, the attention to sustainability, which comes into focus on many new laws and regulations, is also pitching in the same direction. And also the increased utilization of carbon markets, designing virtuous emission trading schemes is an important tool towards carbon limitation. But digital and green clusters are entangled with the world economic and financial agendas in a balancing act which is more easily drawn on a position paper than executed in each constituency. The digital world has seen shiftings and increasing arm wrestling exercises between international institutions and developers, with the IMF recently launching warnings on cryptocurrencies, such as Bitcoin, Ether, among many, while embracing central banks' digital currencies. On the asset digitization side, blockchain technology has in the meantime allowed the marketization of an increasing number of non-fungible tokens, or as they are very well known, NFTs, which are taking the virtual world by storm. The green financing movement is also picking up speed, gaining relevance in the largest and most advanced economies. And this is a good sign. The attention by institutional investors, but also private ones, to the ESG and sustainability agendas of bond issuers and the consequential pricing of debt is a powerful tool to direct efforts in pushing for better and greener economic growth. The institution then of an international sustainability standard board, which will follow the IFRS reporting rules, and the drafting of a common taxonomy for green finances are yet another proof of a more and more intertwined world where isolationism will have no room for success. But inflationary pressure stemming from an increased speed in the recovery in some main economies, coupled with a bottleneck in the supply chain, however temporary it may be, and exceptional climatic effects are pushing prices up, while GDP growth may not be as significant in the years to come. From this, the word stagflation has started to circulate, although only at a whisper. Countering the effects of energy shortages, some countries are retrenching from their carbon-free agendas, resourcing back to coal to allow their production lines to maintain momentum. And this will introduce a key debate at the upcoming COP26 in an effort to set a proper pace to decarbonization. So where does China stand in this scenario? Which are the economic, financial, digital, and social issues impacting this year? And which are the ones which may impact the next one? Since a few years, China has moved to a new normal, led by consumption rather than driven by investments, moving from a low-cost manufacturer to a value-added developer of technology and services. But the results so far have not fully met the original expectations. The ambitious Belt and Road Initiative and the Made in China 2025 business plans have not generated yet the outputs which were hoped for. COVID-19 was a culprit, but definitely not the main one, as international friction and some degree of overconfidence by the Chinese have lowered the initial forecasted targets. It is undeniable, though, that China emerged from the COVID-19 pandemic just after a few months of draconian containment actions, leading the world in its restarting efforts and, in some way, becoming, although only for a short while, the locomotive of the world recovery. During the past years, China has reached some major milestones. Economically, it is still the world's largest manufacturer, with the largest population, although soon to be passed by India. Its total trade over the years has continued to grow, with a reduced relevance on export in terms of quantity, but surge in quality and therefore increasing in money terms. It was still the largest recipient of FDIs in 2020. Its GDP, measured in terms of purchasing power parity, has shown continuous surge as a share of global GDP. Socially, it managed to defeat poverty, measured by Chinese standards. The life expectancy increased by 10 years over the past 40 years, now setting it at an age of 76.9, which is getting closer to the average of the developed countries. The infant and maternity mortality, a scar from the past in the social evolution of the country, has dropped more than 4 times in the past 20 years. To help rejuvenating its population, feeling the pressure by a progressively aging society, it removed the one-child policy, although with the disappointing results so far. Structurally, China built in the past few years 146,000 kilometers of railway routes, of which 38,000 of high-speed tracks, the largest in the world. It also built 161,000 kilometers of expressways and 241 civil airports. Technologically, China built 960,000 5G base stations and 365 million terminals. It has about 1 billion internet users and growing. Its online financial structure has developed exponentially, showing that over 40% of the world's e-commerce transactions are currently taking place in China, up from only 1% 10 years ago. But challenges, of course, lay ahead. GDP growth is slowing down. We have seen the latest, the third quarter results, and this is the trend. However, continuing at a more sustainable level, with the trend over the next few years of flattening out, pressured by domestic consumption growth, global trade repositioning, overcapacity in key industries, real estate contraction, international geopolitical balance, and with the ever-looming Damocles sword of COVID-19 hanging over its head. If I can single out, however, some key challenges emerging from this 2021, which will be felt next year, I would focus on the following. The big falls, deriving basically from some loose leveraging and overstretched debt. The big falls of companies such as Anbang, HNA, Huarong, Baoshan, and more recently, Evergrande, are challenging the Chinese government in maintaining stability while cleaning the mess. The first 4 were, or still are, financial companies, which carried massive liabilities, but which had relatively simple categories of affected investors. In this case, the multiple levers in the hands of a centralist state like China were used to appease clients and shareholders. For Evergrande, the case is a bit more sticky, not only because of the huge hole of over $300 billion, but mostly because it is affecting millions of private home investors who, for the most part, made down payments in hard cash for houses which were not yet finished, or, like in some cases, never even started. The underlying principles of the Communist Party of China imposed to protect first the individual citizen, i.e. those who have paid loads of money and risk of getting nothing, neither a house nor their money back. Then they will probably turn to the domestic debt holders and finally to the foreign ones. And the shareholders of Evergrande, well, that was kind of a work in progress for quite some time. The full assessment of the Evergrande failure is still ongoing, but the contagion effect to the secondary economy and to the other micro or small medium enterprises, which may have pledged Evergrande bonds as guarantees to get the necessary short-term loans, is still on record. One thing is already evident, though, to anyone with boots on the ground here in China. The real estate market has momentarily stalled. Sale of land by local governments has retrenched, and developers don't buy anything, waiting to see what's coming next. And so do we. Then we have what we call the smaller falls. These are SMEs operating in private education, e-gaming, property-related biz, crypto markets, all swept away in one big wave of government regulations, which have, for the most part, caught SMEs investors, both domestic and foreign, by surprise. The underlying motives are indeed socially commendable, but it is unquestionable that they have created havoc in those respected areas and affected the operations of hundreds of small entrepreneurs, mostly domestic, but also international. Increasing domestic consumption has been also a thorn in the back for China for some years. A structured and perduring reform of a national safety net, coupled with an increase in urbanization and a subsequent boost in growth of the middle class, may accomplish both goals of increasing domestic spending and pulling China out of the middle income trap. But this is still a long shot. There have been, at the same time, some big rises. Digital and high-tech small and big companies have stormed the Chinese market as producers, developers, or simple users. Mobile companies like Xiaomi, Oppo, Honor, the spin-off from Huawei, have increased their market share. Wind and solar power suppliers are maintaining the world dominance, while AI, 5G, AR, and VR are continuing their evolution and presence in many markets. Online shopping and service industries have had exponential growth, which COVID-19 only contributed to accelerate in the already massive trend across the country. The common use of digital payments, mostly by WeChat or Alipay, have completely replaced paper or plastic in the millennials and beyond. Currently, around 1/3 of all goods sales are done online across a range of large and small platforms, or directly through social media such as WeChat. A recent survey showed that 60% of people aged 55 or older purchased more goods online this year, and only 1% said that they never shopped online. Green financing has also seen an exponential growth, bringing China to the risk of becoming a potential green swan that is creating a bubble of excessive green debts, which are still not so tightly controlled. An interesting recent evolution has been the introduction for listed banks of the obligation to file an environmental report, the first one becoming due in March of next year, which should give clear accountability of ESG and sustainability policies in the bank's loans and investment profiling. So quick falls and quick rises have prompted the introduction of more compelling laws and regulations, of which many came to press, and some are still on a probationary period in this second part of 2021. The new data security law, with its 3 data classifications, the ordinary, the important, and the core, is setting new standards, which all enterprises will have to conform to. As well as for the new personal data protection law, which makes it illegal now in China for any other party to read or use data without a person's specific authorization, let alone exploit the data for profit. We have seen the real estate market engulfed in the so-called 3 red lines, which refer to the balance sheet and cash position of the real estate developers. Note that to date, only about 50% of the developers fulfill all 3 requirements. The gaming industry has been hit by the limitation they use by youngsters of video games, not more than 3 hours on weekends only, and for kids below the age of 18. The private tutoring is now only allowed for non-profit educational supplements. Abortion and child policies have been both geared in the direction of pushing Chinese families to have more children. Unfortunately, this has not produced any meaningful development to date. The cosmetic surgery sector has been reined in a more controlled environment, barring speculation, counterfeits, and malpractice. Overseas listings of tech companies have been scrutinized for those companies with over 1 million customers, fearing intrusions by unfriendly governments in personal data privacy. If you wish, a kind of response to the threat posed by the ever-possible recurrence by the United States to the so-called Cloud Act of 2018 versus US registered companies. SOE's safety net is now being pulled out from the previously rocky foundation of automatic bailout of any directly or indirectly state-owned companies' debt issues, making investors taking bigger precautions where to put their money. Last but not least, in my list, it would be audit firms. Audit firms have been under the spotlight, and not just the domestic ones. The recent case with Evergrande exemplifies the magnitude of the problem, and we can expect a pretty strong reaction to counter this slack in the future. So for 2022, my expectations are that geopolitical and financial challenges will have characterized this year will continue. And the dual circulation enactment by China will maintain its predominance in a domestic self-supporting trend. The position, though, by the Chinese commercial players is still open to catch any opportunities which may come about from the overseas economies, especially from the euro area, as there is an unsung reckoning that China cannot lock itself down and away from the rest of the developed world. And in this, Europe stands a better chance than the United States, which being China's largest trading partner can make China run the risk of importing inflation from the Federal Reserve's money printing quantitative easing program, a risk which is paired with the uncertainties coming from the midterm elections next year. But until the horizon is clear, the Chinese leaders and businesses have put momentarily more capital and resources in the domestic circulation, considered primary and safer, while keeping the doors still open for trade and commerce with countries and currencies more stable longer term under the international circulation, considered secondary. This dichotomy may take different twists and turns, and we shall keep eyes and ears open as the events unfold in front of our eyes. Geopolitically, uncertainties will persist, and we should follow closely 3 key events in China: the Winter Olympics in February, the National People's Congress in March, and the 20th CPC National Congress in November, which will indicate if and for how long the current leadership will be extended. The social safety net will demand important reforms. The most critical and historical ones are linked to health, education, and retirement. The health and education systems must be enhanced to cater for an even more necessary reform of the residency rights, the famous hukou. More modern health assistance system needs to be provided, relying not just on the more or less renowned hospitals, but creating an infrastructure which can cater the poorer and rural areas, allowing their hukous to enjoy equally qualified assistance. Likewise, an educational access system less reliant on the residency of the children should be considered. This also to avoid a collateral effect on the real estate prices associated to the quality of the schools. The retirement system has been for many years under reform, without succeeding in providing a meaningful alleviation to an increasingly insufficient national retirement fund. A recently launched national fund to cater the development of a third pillar may not be the end solution to the problem, as an increase in the retirement ages of both men and women would be a much more effective solution to counter the ever-increasing longevity of the Chinese population, and at the same time aligning China to the most developed economies. In this fluid and intertwined evolution, which carries still many uncertainties, taking turns as the pendulum swings, I remain a firm believer that for the European SMEs, the opportunities are still there. There will be indeed the necessity to deepen your homework, find allies, utilize the consulting resources that the European Commission is making available for you. This will not be a guarantee of future success, which will still remain embedded in your own abilities and skills, but will surely help you to avoid making unnecessary mistakes. Those European SMEs who are already in China will have indeed to abide to more strict rules in data management, in financial control and governance at a level not seen before, but will maintain their capacity to produce, be remunerated, and repay its shareholders overseas through dividends or capital repatriation. The IPR regulations on both sides are making progress, and for this, the China SME IP Help Desk will be a must-stop for anyone interested to produce or export their products to China. We at the EU SME Centre here in Beijing, as well as in Brussels, stand by you to offer our decade-old experience on the Chinese market. Call us, connect with us through our website, and follow us on the main social media. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Renzo. It was really insightful. For the audience, we have received a couple of questions, but I would like to remind everybody that please submit them along the way so that we can better coordinate during the Q&A session that follows each of the speeches. So for the first one, Renzo, I would like to ask your opinion on a couple of things. First of all, in your opinion, which major domestic or international economic factors could risk of making China's 14th year plan run into a problem?
Well, I think that in principle, only those which China leadership cannot directly control. So I would say COVID-19 being one, which is a pandemic, and clearly also the international actions or reactions to China's policies. Having said that, however, both are manageable. The pandemic has become kind of a known neighbor, and any resurgence will cause some retrenchment in social economic activities, but it will not lock the whole country down. The geopolitical scenario is clearly more of a complex story. This because it has already triggered a general war of words, as I would call it, especially between the two big players, the United States and China, with the European Union sitting in the foyer, but with probably the bigger foot on the U.S. side of the U.S.'s camp. So future sanctions to China could definitely exacerbate the balance of trade, which in my opinion could, however, in the end damage both sides. But China has still the ability to maneuver around any difficulties. Although, let me say that in the history of these 5-year plans, we have seen that in the end, not all of those targets have been accomplished. So there is already a pretty good understanding that we have to discount some of those objectives as some objectives that will not be able to be fully accomplished.
Thank you very much for your reply. There is another question about decoupling. So in your opinion, how much is commerce decoupled from politics in China? You mentioned that the trade between the EU and China will not stop, but which shape do you think this will take in the future?
Well, this is a tricky one. In my opinion, well, I give you, of course, as always, my personal opinion, and it's really mine only. But in my opinion, there is always a link between politics and commerce. There's no matter which form the government is running the show. So its actions may be more subtle or more abrupt, but never totally decoupled. So having said that, the European Union as a political entity will probably maintain an arm's length position with China. But the single countries and their relevant trade organizations and Chamber of Commerce will probably continue to focus on business and support their SMEs, maintaining the local connections and looking for opportunities. In this sense, I think that our projects, the ones that we at the EU SME Centre are running, the ones that the China IP SME Help Desk are running, the Enterprise Europe Network, all these projects that are under the umbrella and under the support from the European Commission, these are going to be extremely useful tools to navigate the European SMEs through this moment, to this time. But as I said, there is, although we cannot, let's say, separate completely the two, but there is a clear indication here on the ground that the Chinese the business people or business organization are still continuing to look for opportunities, to look to cooperate with European SMEs. They're trying to look for partnership. They're asking to organize B2Bs and so on and so forth. So it is still pretty active.
Thank you very much for that, Renzo. I believe we have space for a last question, if you agree, and this is related to the dual circulation. With the dual circulation in effect and the clear preference for a domestic focus, what do you think the chances are for European SMEs to successfully enter as a new player in the market?
Dual circulation, from my view, it's in seeing it from the Chinese side, I see it more as a protective action against possible forceful interruption because of geopolitical frictions of the supply chain, which allows the productive engine of China to work. In this sense, I think that SMEs which can be useful and helpful to China for its growth, they can benefit and have great opportunities to penetrate the market and also to grow and to generate profits for their shareholders. But as I said before, and as it was quite well exposed yesterday by Alessio Bettino in his speech yesterday, there must be a very thorough homework to be done, leaving no stones unturned. So sometimes delaying by 6 months or even a year your entrance in China because you may still have some issues to iron out, could be saving you money, quite a lot of them. And instead of rushing in, throwing a lot of euros out of the window and witnessing a flop rather than a success. So time, but very strong consideration, a very detailed homework. I still see that this could be, and of course, finding the right niche market where there could be interest from the Chinese side to cooperate with European SMEs, that could be a success factor.
Thank you very much, Renzo, for making yourself available for this amazing overview. We are just receiving a last question. No, okay, that is related to the slide. Just for everybody, yes, we will distribute the presentations after the session. And if everybody agrees, we are going to jump into the next presentation.